I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, a bipartisan group of lawmakers propose a $908 billion stimulus package. President-elect Biden saying it is just a down payment. This is a new stay-at-home order is issued in San Francisco and other Bay Area counties through January 4th, saying hospitals the start of the year. Sal Khan of Khan Academy will give us a report card on how remote learning is going across the nation. And Slack CEO Stuart Butterfield says he is sick of talking about Microsoft. He joins us to talk about why he sold to Salesforce in a $27.7 billion deal and says he plans to dispel the myth that the competition had anything to do with it. Those stories in a moment, but first, reiterating that new stay-at-home order here in the San Francisco Bay Area taking effect on Sunday through January 4th. This is different than the governor's intensive care unit thresholds for stay-at-home orders nationwide. Businesses are going to be taking the biggest hit with new restrictions and workers still looking for relief from Washington. There were good signs today from the Capitol that helped move the markets. Our Abigail Doolittle has more. Abigail, just taking a closer look at this stay-at-home order, it means closing all indoor and outdoor dining, all gatherings with anyone outside your home banned through the holidays. As a San Francisco resident, just sort of taking this all in, that this is going to be happening as of Sunday. Are you seeing any moves in the markets?
There are small declines in the S&P 500 futures, Emily, very, very small off of the record highs on the day. I think that some of this is priced in, and I'm certainly sorry for the difficulty that you, family and friends might be suffering around this. But again, largely priced in. So the S&P 500 SPDR ETF, proxy for the futures, down about 0.2%. On the day, though, big gains, record highs for the S&P 500, along with the NASDAQ 100 and Russell 2000. So all sizes and shapes of stocks were higher on the day. This, of course, has to do with that jobs report, which was actually much worse than expected, with 245,000 jobs added, missing by almost 50% and down from the month before by more than 60%. But the idea is because of that payrolls report, that means that stimulus will be on the way, or that's what folks are hoping for. So record highs for stocks. Now, on the week, there were some big movers, Emily, including Micron, which helped the stocks climb to a record high in the day. Micron up 14% this week. They had a plant, ironically, in Taiwan, down a memory plant, so that brought up the pricing for memory. They also pre-announced the upside. NTAP, the storage company, they put up a strong quarter. Wynn Resorts higher on Macau revenue being less bad than expected. And Carnival, folks expecting them to start cruising again in 2021. And then finally, Emily, bonds showing the reflation trade. Overall, a risk-on week, Emily.
All right, Abigail Doolittle, thank you so much for breaking it down. Really appreciate that update. Have a wonderful weekend and stay safe. Back to our top story. As the San Francisco Bay Area orders a stay-at-home order across the region set to begin Sunday through January 4th. That means through the holidays. All eyes are on D.C. tonight on several fronts. First, it looks like a stimulus package will clear Congress, and it could come as soon as this weekend. Second, there is a brewing fight over a defense bill and Section 230. And finally, the Biden transition team making more progress. Here to break it all down, Bloomberg's Laura Davidson from Washington. Laura, let's start with stimulus. A lot of business owners, folks here who are going to be impacted by this new stay-at-home order, want to know if there's going to be more money in their pockets. What's the latest?
So there's a lot of bipartisan momentum at the Capitol right now trying to come up with this plan. The question is, though, can they do it, and can they do it in time before the Christmas holiday? So the deadline that's out there is December 11th, next Friday. The federal government runs out of money, so they're hoping to attach some stimulus measures to that bill. However, that timeline is already slipping. Lawmakers are already talking about extending a week, so they wouldn't actually reach that agreement for 2 weeks from now. That buys them a little bit more time to come up with some agreements about some of the sticking points in the legislation, in the stimulus bill. Democrats really want some money for state and local governments. Republicans have said no. On the flip side, Democrats really don't like some provisions that Republicans say are important that would provide some legal liability immunity for companies. So that's one thing they're working out. Another thing, an outstanding issue, is the plans that are currently being discussed don't have any of those $1,200 stimulus checks. So there's some Republicans and Democrats, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez from the progressive side, and some more conservative Republicans who are talking about that. So all of that has to be worked out, just in the next coming days.
So let's talk about this defense appropriations bill. President Trump had threatened to veto it if it did not include a provision to abolish Section 230, which of course concerns the liability that social media companies bear for content that is posted on their platform. It sounds like that threat can be overcome by the support the bill has in Congress. What's the latest?
Yeah, so Steny Hoyer, who's the kind of the top vote counter in the House, he says he believes that there's enough votes if President Trump were to veto this because of the Section 230 inclusion, that they would go ahead and they have a veto-proof majority. They could go ahead and pass it, without President Trump's approval. We'll see. It looks like that will come up for a vote on Tuesday in the House. The Senate will follow, and then we'll see what the president does and then what Congress does to respond. But just remember, this is happening kind of on this backdrop of stimulus, government funding. There's a lot happening in the Capitol building next week, and a lot of things that could go very wrong if something takes longer than expected.
And talk to us about the progress the Biden transition team made this week and what you expect will be happening next week. A number of cabinet positions filled, but a lot still open, including Attorney General.
Yeah, so there were, kind of the chief, economic players. Those positions have all been filled out. Critically important, just with kind of the fragile state the economy is in. He also made some progress in terms of bringing on some medical advisors, and that was really kind of the Biden transition's number one priority, is to have people in place to be talking to current people, NIH, CDC, HHS, about the plan for a vaccine rollout. Obviously, a lot of news over the past couple of weeks about approvals there and distribution starting. So this is very important, and that's really kind of their focus going forward, and especially into next week when there could be some more vaccine news in terms of approvals and distribution plans.
So when it comes to vaccine news and approvals and distributions, talk to us about next week. Pfizer is supposedly meeting with the FDA and health officials on December 10th and Moderna on December 17th.
Yes, so both of those timelines are there, and the folks are very optimistic that those approvals will come through. Though there's already been a lot of concern, just kind of on the political side of this. You have, politicians like Obama came out this week and said that he would be willing to take the vaccine sort of live on TV to instill a lot of confidence. So that's really, while the scientists seem to be optimistic, there's a lot of concern about what happens, in terms of bringing the public on board, that this is safe, this is effective, and this is something that they should take as soon as it's available to them.
All right, lots on tap next week. Bloomberg's Laura Davison. Laura, thank you so much for those updates. Moving on to deals now. One took the spotlight this week, and that is Salesforce agreeing to buy Slack for just over $27 billion, almost 28. This left some questioning what it means for Slack and CEO Stuart Butterfield going forward.
The important thing from my perspective, certainly from our employees' perspective, and probably from our customers' perspective, is I am and will remain the CEO of Slack.
Will you become one of Salesforce's presidents?
I believe so.
All right, my interview earlier with Slack CEO Stuart Butterfield. More of that conversation coming up later this hour. Up next, DOCUSIGN reports a blockbuster quarter, beating estimates as the work-from-home period extends around the world. We're going to hear from DOCUSIGN CEO Dan Springer next about what he thinks the tailwind will mean for longer-term growth. This is Bloomberg. DOCUSIGN has been one of the high-flying stocks of the year, benefiting from the digitization of signature and agreements that came with remote work. The company reported strong third-quarter results that beat estimates on all fronts, sending shares up as much as almost 12%. Joining me now to discuss whether the growth will sustain post-pandemic, DOCUSIGN CEO Dan Springer. Dan, thank you so much for joining us. And we're nowhere near close to being out of this yet. given the latest stay-at-home order in San Francisco. I know you live in San Francisco. Your office is in San Francisco. What's your reaction, to this new order and things clearly just not getting better and perhaps getting worse before they do?
Yeah, well, it's hugely disappointing, obviously. And, all DocuSign 5,000 plus employees have been working from home since March, and we would love to get back into the office, as would I. But I'm at the same time, given the situation and the health risk and the situation with our hospitals, I think it's prudent for us to be cautious right now. I will be supportive of going another, chunk of time here, being extra conservative, and it's not fun, but I think it's medicine that I'd rather take this period right now than the much worse potential we could have from the pandemic if we don't address it and nip it in the bud now.
Now, it's a trend that was happening anyway, the digitization of signatures and agreements, and should continue to happen. But how much has the pandemic accelerated your growth? And will this growth continue when, let's hope, there is a vaccine and you can go back to the office?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that as much as you are, Emily. My view is that DocuSign definitely got a tailwind initially. In the first part of the year, we saw that there was an acceleration in demand, particularly for our e-signature, which is kind of, the sort of flagship product that DocuSign has. And what we've seen now, though, is that that's translated into people saying, this is fantastic to digitally transform my business, and they're finding more and more use cases. So our view is, while it was a turbocharging, it won't sort of let up, and we're going to continue to have very high growth going forward.
So, what does a post-COVID normal world, new normal, I'm sure, actually look like to you? I'm sure there's a lot of pull forward demand, and certainly this is a trend that's going to keep accelerating, but does that acceleration slow down?
Yeah, and if you think about the acceleration, and it was substantial, right? Having billings growth in the 50, 60% the last 3 quarters, and adding, from a direct customer standpoint, 34,000 not counting our digital or web customers in the first 9 months of the year. Sort of unprecedented for us, for sure. But as we look at it going forward, we think we're going to maintain very robust growth because, as I said, the customers that we've brought on are actually looking to accelerate with our land and expand model and do more with us. And we're also seeing our net retention rate, our dollar net retention rate, shot up to 122% here in Q3. We just reported yesterday, the highest we've ever had, and outside of the range that we initially thought we would be. So our growth from our existing customers, not just the net new that are coming to us from COVID, is also accelerating. So those factors give me confidence that we will see continued high growth for many quarters to come.
You've got a partnership with Slack. Slack users can use DocuSign to sign contracts without leaving the platform. DocuSign is a $45 billion company. Salesforce just bought Slack for almost $28 billion. What is your take on the deal, and if it will mean more consolidation in the software industry?
Yeah, I mean, it was a big deal for sure. We're close to both companies. I'm actually looking at the Salesforce headquarters right there and the Slack headquarters right there. So literally we're close to them because the DocuSign headquarters is 2 blocks that way. But we have important partnerships with them. We're customers of Slack and of Salesforce, and they're both customers of DocuSign. We just announced the integration with Slack, and of course Salesforce has been one of our strongest go-to-market partners. They're originally an investor in the company. And so we feel really good about both those companies. I think it's exciting space. I don't think the tech space, if you'd asked me a year ago, would we see deals in the $20+ billion, for a company like Slack, I probably wouldn't have guessed it. And I think for Slack employees, for Slack customers and shareholders, it's a fantastic deal, and Salesforce will be a fantastic home for them. So I think it's a lot of positive.
So will there be more consolidation, do you think, in the enterprise software business? And obviously consumer side as well.
Yeah, I think so. I think that the construct has a lot of cash, obviously, on the sidelines. There's a lot of demand for growth. And the enterprise software space has really been one of the areas of dramatic growth. And that's one of the reasons valuations, as you've indicated, have gotten so high to levels we've really never had before. It's unprecedented valuation levels. And I think there was a concern that M&A wouldn't happen at these heightened levels. I think the answer is one data point that suggests that they will, based on this deal. And I'm not a sort of financier from that standpoint. I run a software company, but my assumption would be we will probably see continued M&A as more and more people are not only doing the strategic sort of pieces on the chessboard, but also just feeling probably more comfortable seeing, Mark make that move from a valuation acquisition, that other people will probably look at those multiples and say, I guess the water's warm, let's jump in.
There's been increasing interest in the biometrics part of the business given the pandemic, and we've seen biometrics accelerate. What is your take on biometric security, and how could that fit into your business?
Well, biometrics is just another example for us, and an important one, of our overall construct of identity. And at the end of the day, one of the biggest challenges, whether you're taking a security standpoint or just a business standpoint, is you have to be able to figure out who's on the other side of that keyboard, so to speak. And so I think identity is going to be big, and I think biometrics will be important. Although, I'll tell you, in the late 90s when I was at NextCard and we were trying to figure out, as you recall, how we were going to build our business and how a financial services company could leverage biometrics, we started talking about what that would look like. It's 20 years later, and we really haven't progressed that much in that time. So I think there's a big question of, is that going to be, sort of the unlocking vehicle that takes us to the next level? Or will people think some of the existing things we do today on the internet to identify someone, as simple as sending someone an email, having them do a sort of a second party authentication, with a text message, is that sufficient for business? And is that going to be the mode that we go forward? I think it's still unclear. So at DocuSign, we're thinking about, we want to be in all of those games. So we're looking at all the ways we can leverage identity to ensure our customers will have that full suite of options.
Interesting. DocuSign CEO Dan Springer from a lonely San Francisco office. Appreciate you coming in for this, Dan. Thank you so much for joining us. Coming up, another work from home winner to watch, Logitech. Will its growth keep up, or is it another COVID play? The CEO of Logitech joins us next to share his outlook. This is Bloomberg. Logitech is another tech company riding the work-from-home wave, saying it has entered this holiday season in a stronger position than ever. Demand has been largely lifted by people looking to upgrade their remote work setup, but like many other winners in this category, will that keep up when people return to the office in the future, post-vaccine? Joining us to discuss, Logitech CEO DARRELL, who is the latest guest on our Retail Transformed series. So, Bracken, I know you had some deals over Black Friday and Cyber Monday. What kind of activity did you see, and do you expect to see going into the holidays, and how does that compare to other, more normal years?
Well, we can't really talk about what's going on this quarter since we're sort of in the middle of it. But overall, if I look back on the year to date, it's been a super, as difficult as it has been for the world and for every one of our employees and everybody else. It's been an extremely strong year for us as we've been able to step in between, doctors and patients and family members and people working from home, many for the first time, and students and teachers. It's been a really rewarding time, and our business was up 75% last quarter. Not bad for a 30-year-old company. And so it's been really powerful. And I think that we see that trend continuing right through the year.
I actually remember my very first computer attachable camera, and I believe it was from Logitech all those years ago. What devices, what products have been most popular? What's been flying off the shelves?
We've been really lucky. I wouldn't necessarily say flying off the shelves, but they've been flying through Amazon in the air to get to people's homes. It's been a very wide range, virtually all of our categories. We positioned our whole portfolio behind 4 secular trends. The move from audio, from every audio call becoming a video call unless you're walking around. The move to esports to become the biggest collection of spectator and participant sports in the world. The work from anywhere trend, and then finally the trend for everyone to create. We're creators like you and me and all our kids and individuals would create more content than big companies, and that's happening. And we're the enabler for all 4 of those. So the trends are super huge, and they touch all of our categories. Our microphones are virtually sold out. Blue microphone. Our webcams are virtually sold out for all the reasons you'd expect. We've done very well in mice and keyboards. We've done just well in almost every one of our categories.
Okay, so what happens post-COVID when we all feel safe enough to go back to work and, we don't need extra stuff at home, how does that impact your demand and everything that has been potentially pulled forward?
Well, it's really exciting for us because, first of all, everybody wants to get back to work and they want to get back to socializing. So we're excited about that. And the other thing is, these were not short-term trends. We were on their own very, very long-term trends, and we expect them to continue. The video enablement of the office continues to be a big trend. Yet people will go back to work, but our view is that they're going to work a lot more from home than they used to. So maybe it's a few days a week at home, a few days a week at work. And so this desktop that they have in front of them at home is still going to be important. And in fact, I think a lot of people are like me, and we know they are, which is I've got a desktop set up, but I haven't really gotten it optimized yet. I've got 2 or 3 in my house. And if you've got kids in school or a spouse that's working too, and you end up with multiple setups and they all sort of need to be upgraded, either aesthetically, because now it's part of your home decor, it's out there all the time, or functionally, because you kind of scrambled to get what you could in the beginning, and now you need to improve it, or just ergonomically, because something's hurting, All those are opportunities for us to upgrade a much bigger installed base. Now it's the home and the office. So we're optimistic about the go forward.
And last quick question. I spoke to the president of Dell yesterday who said we're seeing a renaissance of the PC. Is that how you would describe it?
Yeah, I think, the PC continues to be central to our lives. Now the PC, what a PC has changed. It's now actually a kind of a carrier for cloud services. So what you're really working on when you're working on a PC is actually in the cloud. So you feel like you're typing on something that's physically in front of you, and you are, or working on something physically in front of you, but you're actually connecting to something in the cloud. We view all of what we do now as peripherals to cloud services, and the PC is a stop in between. So I think it's a renaissance of the cloud, and the PC is a benefactor, and so are peripherals.
You also have a universal remote quickly that can control like more than a dozen different things. And I wonder if staying at home and the rise of streaming means those are flying through the air as well. We've got about 30 seconds.
We've done well in everything. That particular category, we're actually de-emphasizing. But if you talk about the rise of streaming, the different kind of streaming, we've got, so many people are being so creative during this period. So our microphones and our webcams have really exploded as people have become, TikTokers and YouTubers and podcasters. I can't tell you how many new podcasts I've seen. And so as a result, we're really selling a lot. It's exciting.
Right. You definitely see the rise of human creativity thanks to all of this technology. Logitech CEO Bracken Darrell, thank you so much for joining us. All right, coming up, Slack co-founder and CEO Stuart Butterfield. I spoke with him earlier today about the company's mega deal with Salesforce and what it means for him going forward. This is Bloomberg.
It's a marriage made in heaven, and we could not be more excited about this combination.
Here
It's a marriage made in heaven, and we could not be more excited about this combination.
This was a good outcome for Slack investors, and I think at the end of the day, this is where the road ends for Slack.
So both Slack and Salesforce are a great partner and customers of ours, and so we're very excited. Congratulations to both of them on this deal. So I think it's great that those two organizations are coming together.
So I continue to believe this is the right move for Salesforce, even though it's from 3 months ago not doing M&A, and I think it's hard to argue with the success and the strategy that Benioff has shown.
The digital world, and especially the digital world with customers, whether it's B2B or B2C, Slack is going to be literally the icing on the cake, making everything better.
A lot of metaphors there from Salesforce CEO Mark Benioff earlier this week, talking about Salesforce and their mega acquisition of Slack in a $27.7 billion deal. Earlier today, I spoke to Slack CEO Stuart Butterfield and talked about how he would describe the buyout.
The key message here is that there is an opportunity for something that's non-linear. It's not just, we have some software, they have a lot of salespeople, we're going to plug in and they're going to sell more software, although, of course, we will also do that. They're incredibly strong leader in CRM, and I mean that in the broad sense, in customer success, in marketing and support. And that's usually the core of any company's operations. We're wall-to-wall on the communication. And you put those two together, there's an opportunity to create workflows and productivity improvements and simplifying people's work, but ultimately making organizations more effective, more aligned. And I think there's a really unique synergy between the two companies.
Who will you be reporting to, Benioff or Brett Taylor, the COO of Salesforce? Mark told me that it's up to Brett to decide.
I assume it is up to Brett to decide. I don't know. I mean, the important thing from my perspective, certainly from our employees' perspective, and probably from our customers' perspective, is I am and will remain the CEO of Slack.
Will you become one of Salesforce's presidents?
I believe so.
All right. So, look, Slack is a beloved product. You and I have had many conversations since everybody started working from home. That said, since the direct listing, the stock has languished compared to other, quote unquote, work from home stocks. I know that you're trained to tell me that you don't think about that, but I'm curious how much that weighed on you and if that played into this deal at all.
No, I mean, so of course I do. I notice, but I don't think it played into this deal at all. I think one thing that might have gotten lost because we announced our earnings, Salesforce announced their earnings, and we announced the deal all at the same time. So there's a lot of information. Is we just came out of an incredible quarter. We grew net new paid customers by 140%, added 12,000 new customers this quarter, and that's the heart of the business. And, that leads to the future billings, which lead to the future revenue. So we're really pleased with the growth. Part of that is an increase in awareness or the utility of the product, I guess, as a digital HQ in a world where physical HQs are less well used. And that's coming from the pandemic and the working from home. But a lot of it is also just improvements to our new user experience, getting better at helping people understand Slack and helping them get started. But the big source of that is Slack Connect. So that's the ability for two Slack using organizations to communicate across organizational boundaries. The last 4 quarters of growth there, 140%, 160%, 200%, 240%. So as it's scaling up to now over 500,000 connected endpoints, the growth is increasing. And the last thing I would say about that is it's incredible opportunity to work on the next generation of CRM applications when you can work across organizational boundaries.
Now, what do you make of the narrative that this deal was done because of increasing competition and increasing threat from Microsoft, that they were starting to beat you and customers, and that the perhaps smartest way forward was a tie-up with another giant?
I think that narrative will eventually be dispelled. Personally, I'm sick of talking about Microsoft, so I'm going to take it from a slightly different angle here. So just looking at the US, and to be clear, we have a very strong business worldwide. Japan's our #2 market, growing very quickly. UK and Europe, all very strong. But just looking at the US, biggest telco, wall-to-wall Slack. Largest media company, wall-to-wall Slack. I have to look at my notes here because there's so many here. The largest issuer of credit cards, wall-to-wall Slack. The biggest in consumer electronics, wall-to-wall Slack. The leading retailer, wall-to-wall Slack. #1 in apparel, wall-to-wall Slack. And you zoom out from that, it's 2/3 of the Fortune 100. It's 3 of the 5 biggest companies in the US by revenue or customers. Operator of the nation's largest integrated healthcare system. 4 of the 6 biggest telcos. I mean, I could just go on this list forever. So, I've given up on trying to point people to the empirical facts here because there's an article of faith about the competition that I'm unable to overcome.
So let's take a different tact here, given that you have, fairly recently built a company from the ground up. Mark Benioff started his company 20 years ago. He's done a lot of deals that's helped the company keep growing. What is your advice to Salesforce, Benioff, and Brett going to be to keep innovating and stay nimble?
It's a great question. And what's interesting is for the answer for us, I think for Slack, for Salesforce, for the combined entity in the future is the same as for customers. And I think it's really leveraging technology to take advantage of our newfound ability to do end-to-end digital transformation. And when I say that, it's kind of like people will probably go, but let me give you one concrete example. So Very often our account executives ask for help from executives, including people like me or other executives at the company with a customer. They want me to send an email, introduce myself, ask if we could have a meeting. And in one world, the account executive goes and asks their manager, like, hey, could you get Stuart to please send an email? And they go to their director and they go to an exec and they happen to know my executive assistant and they ask. And then it gets to me and I ask them, tell me about the customer, give me some background. Instead, we built a really simple workflow. The account executive puts all the information in it. It gets sent to a Slack channel where everyone can approve it. Giving that kind of structure not only saves people seconds and minutes here and there, it creates a lot of clarity.
My conversation with Slack co-founder and CEO, Stuart Butterfield. All right, coming up, a new stay-at-home order has been issued for the San Francisco Bay Area and more. What does it mean for schools and remote education? We are joined by Khan Academy's Sal Khan. Next, this is Bloomberg. Online education firm COURSERA is said to be weighing a 2021 IPO. People familiar with the matter say the move could bring the valuation of the company to $5 billion. While no decision is final and the company could stay private, it begs the question of the valuation of distance learning amid a pandemic and beyond. And on that topic, a new stay-at-home order has just been imposed on the San Francisco Bay Area, effective Sunday. The counties believe there is a need for an even more aggressive step than what Governor Newsom has already imposed. Rather than waiting for ICUs to fill up, they say we need to take action now. Under the governor's order, schools that are already open can remain open. However, it remains a setback still to kids getting back into the classroom. Joining me now, CEO and founder of the Khan Academy, Sal Khan, who has been closely following how students are doing and sees many students on the platform himself. Sal, I just have to get your reaction to this new stay-at-home order. It doesn't apply to schools right now, but many schools, including my own, never reopened and now can't reopen. What is your take on this as the pandemic drags on?
Yeah, it's tough. I know it's already been a tough year. My children's school, which I'm on the board of, they were starting to kind of reopen for the very youngest kids, and they were already planning for this kind of Thanksgiving to Christmas break period to not do physical school. But now, because of the new stay-at-home order, that obviously makes even more sense. I think, what we're seeing in the data coming from multiple assessment parties is that the kids who are able to engage online are actually keeping up for the most part. What I worry about is the things that the assessments aren't assessing, which is their social emotional well-being, their emotional health, how well they feel connected to their peers, et cetera, et cetera. And those are the things that are clearly getting lost right now, especially for the younger kids who really need that running around and making friendships and learning how to work with others.
What is the data that we have? I understand, for math in particular, you're seeing math decline 5 to 10 percentage points. Does that mean that's a subject in particular that's more difficult to teach online?
Yeah, this comes from data, fairly new data from the Northwest Education Association around the assessment they provide called the MAP Growth, which measures how much kids grow. And what they're seeing is reading, somewhat surprisingly, has not degraded so much. You would expect, if you have during summer vacation, we have the summer slide, kids atrophy, COVID, people have been predicting even larger effect. But when you just look at the assessment, it looks like reading has been reasonably okay. Math has degraded more, but there's a caveat there where the kids that they are assessing now are different than the kids that they were able to assess last year. And they suspect that the kids that they aren't assessing now are the kids who are struggling the most. So that data might be actually a good bit rosier than the actual picture, because everyone we talk to, even when you are able to close digital divide issues, there's 5–10% of kids who are just disengaged right now, and they're also not getting assessed. So those were the kids who are already behind, and these kids are probably falling further and further behind right now.
How big do you think the learning gap will be by spring?
It's a tale of two cities. On the kids who have resources, I think, are doing just fine when it comes to learning, in some cases learning more because their parents are putting more resources behind it. But there's 10–20% of the kids that I think are going to fall further and further behind. So we have to treat this like disaster recovery, I think, going into the next school year to make sure that we don't really lose those kids.
We've got a new administration coming in, and the folks who, even the folks who care about the pandemic and the devastating loss of human life are also really concerned about their children. What would you urge the Biden administration to do? How do they balance the concerns around public health with the concerns around our children's future?
Well, I think number one, the vaccine you've already talked about, that makes a huge difference. At least if the teachers are vaccinated, then the kids, it's a much lower risk for them and for the teachers. That's probably step one. We don't know when that happens, March, April timeframe. On top of that, digital divide is obviously crucial, closing that during COVID, but it's going to pay dividends beyond COVID. And then, really being able to provide some leadership on what distance learning needs to look like, what parents and families can do, regardless of how much support they're getting from their school district, to ensure that kids aren't falling too far behind.
So would you advocate for schools to reopen now if teachers can get vaccinated but kids can't? At what point do you think schools should be mandated to open back up?
Yeah, I'm not an epidemiologist, but I've taught a little bit of it on Khan Academy. So, my best understanding, because I've been following it very closely, is if the teachers are vaccinated, you've taken the major risk off the table. And if then the kids are able to do it with masks and socially distanced, their child-to-child spread, especially with masks on, isn't well documented. So I think if you do that, and then other vulnerable populations in the broader population, healthcare workers, elderly, are also getting vaccinated, that seems like it's the cost benefit analysis for opening schools seems to go heavily in the favor of opening at that point.
There might be a few folks out there looking up your epidemiology classes right now. Talk to us about the activity that you are seeing on Khan Academy as the pandemic drives on, and your vision for the future. I'm sure you've learned a lot through this. We're not always going to be in a pandemic. There will be some sort of new normal, and what then?
Yeah, you can imagine when the pandemic hit back in March and the schools were closed, we saw our traffic go to about 250 to 300% of normal. We've just really been trying to keep up since then, provide more supports for parents, teachers. We're adding a lot more content. We've always had pre-K through college, pre-K with Khan Academy kids. Then we go all the way through calculus, et cetera. I have a new effort called schoolhouse.world, which is free tutoring. We can actually take on several thousands of students for free right now to get free tutoring, which is another layer of support on top of Khan Academy. And we've been trying to do anything we can to support families and teachers to keep learning.
That said, do you think a significantly higher portion of learning will happen remotely anyway, even if we do go back to normal? Like, how do you think the education system will be fundamentally changed?
Well, we don't know for sure. There's some things that I hope will be fundamentally changed. I think it's always valuable to have an in-person experience, but now that we've learned what it's like, so learning does not have to be bound by time or space, I hope that all classrooms maintain their hybrid learning capability. So if there's 2 or 3 kids absent that day, they're sick, they can keep learning. If I'm in one high school, it doesn't offer a course in something, in an elective or a rigorous upper level math class, that I still have access to that course, maybe at another high school in the same district, or maybe on Khan Academy or another high school across the country or across the world. That's the type of thing that would be a shame if we lose. Also, a lot of the teaching best practices that have been happening over video conference, where teachers are making it far more interactive, putting kids into breakout sessions, pulling them out of the screen, mixing it up with very active learning. That's a best practice, whether you're online or in person. And so I hope a lot of that continues. Competency-based learning, where what matters is whether you know the material or not how long you sat in a seat and the process for learning it. I hope that becomes more and more mainstream, especially because we're going to need to give pathways for a lot of folks to fill in their gaps.
What are the main things you are going to be watching through the next 6 months? You talked about your concerns about kids' socio and emotional well-being. What's critical over the next 6 months as things get worse before they get better?
I think we just need to make sure as many families have access, so that, it's not just to education, it's just access to digital, especially if we're in this kind of lockdown COVID situation. On top of that, mechanisms to make sure that those 5-10% of kids stay engaged. We're seeing some school districts doing really good things, calling up kids every day, even for a minute, to make sure that they stay engaged. And then, I hope the new administration, and we're eager to work with them and anyone to get word out that there's free tools available that are proven, highly effective, 20 minutes, 30 minutes a day can keep kids learning. Obviously, Khan Academy is one that I'm very invested in, but obviously we're not for profit. We're funded with philanthropic donations, so I'm not selling anything.
Absolutely, but important for you to get that in there, given how many people it is benefiting. Sal Khan, founder of Khan Academy, always great to have you on the show, and thank you for giving us an update on how our children are doing. All right, meantime, now, the Trump administration says Facebook is discriminating against U.S. workers by designating thousands of positions for foreigners with temporary H-1B visas. This coming after judges have blocked efforts by the administration to halt access to several types of employment-based visas, part of Trump's broader agenda to prioritize filling positions at U.S. companies with Americans. To discuss, we're joined by Bloomberg Tech's Sarah Frier. Sarah, tell us exactly what happened here.
Well, the Trump administration says that there are many positions that Facebook has simply not advertised to U.S. workers, instead only advertising them to foreign workers that would require H-1B visas. And these are jobs, the administration says, that Americans want. And if Americans were given the opportunity to take them, that they would. And so, of course, Facebook is denying the allegations. They say they're working with the Justice Department. But this just is a continued saga over these H-1B visas. Trump has banned a lot of immigration that Facebook has been against. And this is really a crackdown coming at the very end of his administration, which is very interesting.
So how much of this is just short-term pain? And do you expect that the pressure will be off as soon as Joe Biden is in office?
Well, I think that if you look at what the Obama administration did, they were not very concerned about these H-1B visas. It's unclear whether Biden's administration will hold up the mantle, but I expect a lot of changes, especially in the Department of Justice, as I think that the Biden administration has been more focused on antitrust issues for Facebook and content moderation issues. There are a whole lot of things that the Democrats want Facebook to fix. This has not seemed to be at the top of their priority list.
All right, Bloomberg Tech's Sarah Frier with that report there. Thanks so much, Sarah, for following that story for us. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. Wall Street Week with my colleague David Weston is coming up next, where this week's guest discussed the split economic reality of surging COVID cases and vaccine optimism. That is all for today. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone.